Welcome and a good Yom Tov to everybody. Today we are celebrating Yud Shvat, Yud Aleph Shvat. It is the Yom Hilula of the Frierdiker Rebbe, and is the day that the Rebbe was mekabel upon himself the Nesius of World Jewry. And if there's one word that could sum up, or certainly comes to the mind of every single chassid on such a day, is the word Hiskashrus, connection. There's a special relationship and bond that chassidim have with their Rebbe, and their Rebbe has with their chassidim. And over the next half an hour or so, we will have the opportunity to delve into questions that you talmidim submitted, and we will present them to our two panelists who have graciously joined with us today. And in Hashem, hopefully by the end of the program, we will have a better understanding of what a chassid is, what a Rebbe is, what Hiskashrus is, and how we can become better in our connection to the Rebbe. Before we begin, I want to take the opportunity to make a special mention to a very, very special chassid who recently passed away. And we dedicate our past crossfires as well as today and all future crossfires L'nishmas Harav Chassid Harav Tamim Shliach of the Rebbe to Los Angeles, California, Harav Shimon Levi ben the Rebbe's Shadar, the Frierdiker Rebbe Shadar, Harav Menachem Yishmael David Halevi Reichik, Kitu V'ranu Sheikh Liyafer V'Beseicham, and certainly in the chus of everything that we're doing today, it'll be a good chus for the neshama, and certainly everything that we're going to learn today will certainly be just the hachlatas teves that come out of today's program should be the the stuff that the mitzvahs that will tip the scale to bring Mashiach. Before we begin our program, I'd like to introduce our panelists, beginning with a Shliach of the Rebbe to Chabad of Brooklyn Heights, Rabbi Raskin, and Rabbi Yisroel N, Lipsker, and Mashpia in Temimim, Lubavitch of Queens, New York. Thank you, both of you, for taking the time on such a special day as Yud Shvat, Yud Aleph Shvat, as well as your Shlichusin to Fabring with our Bachrim and explain us these special topics. I'm going to begin with Rabbi Raskin. Rabbi Raskin, what is a Rebbe?
The Rebbe himself once answered this question to a group of college students. And he said that in every house, there is electricity that brings light into the house. And under the ground, there are cables that connect your house to a big generator that brings a lot of electricity to the home. Now, for you to have light in the house, you need to first turn on the light switch. When you turn on the switch, the electricity comes into the house and makes the house full of light. The Rebbe went on to say that sometimes when you come into the house at night, it's dark and you don't know where the light switch is. That's where the Rebbe comes in. He takes you by the hand and he puts your hand on the light switch to turn on the light. In other words, every one of us has a connection to the Eibishter. However, we don't always know that connection. We don't always feel that connection. And the Rebbe is here to take us by the hand and turn on the light switch to show us that every Yid has a personal connection with the Eibishter. God, Eibishter, is something that is Eibishter, is above. In other words, we don't always see him. We don't always understand the Eibishter. It's hard to depict what the Eibishter is. But the Rebbe is someone who's in a guf gashmi, someone we can see, someone we can relate to. We know that the Rebbe said that the idea of a Rebbe is Atzmus in a guf, the Eibush himself, so to speak, who goes through the Shliach, the Moshe Rabbeinu of every generation to communicate to our people. So through the Rebbe, we are revealing our personal connection to the Eibush. That's one answer to what a Rebbe is. I'm sure Rabbi Lipsker has more to say on this.
Yes, Rabbi Lipsker, you'd like to add anything?
I can add along the lines of Rabbi Raskin. I'm sure throughout the other conversations and questions, other aspects of the Rebbe will come up. Just on those lines, Chassidim would say that a Rebbe is like a mirror. So just a little quick story. Someone was once in a house of a chassid, and as you all know in your houses, you have many pictures of the Rebbe. This person wasn't a chassid. So he was bothered a little bit. One picture, fine. Why so many pictures? So he asked the chassid, why do you have so many pictures of the Rebbe in your house? So the chassid asks him, do you have a mirror in your house? He says, yes. Do you have more than one mirror in your house? He says, yes. He says, why do you need a lot of mirrors? So he says, I walk around. I always want to make sure I'm still looking the same. I'm still looking good. I want to see how I look. So the chassid said, when I look at the Rebbe is like my mirror. The Rebbe, as opposed to a mirror shows you what you look like. The Rebbe shows you who you are. When you look at the Rebbe on a very practical level, when you watch the Rebbe, you look at the Rebbe, it reminds you about your holiness. It reminds you about your goodness. It reminds you how much you care about doing the right thing.
Thank you. While we're with you, Rabbi Lipsker, with the question before, what is a Rebbe? You can't ask that question without asking the other side of the coin, which is, what is a chassid? So a boy asked, what is a chassid? What does it mean to be a chassid? And how could I become a chassid these days?
Okay, so I'll tell, again, everything that we're answering is one part of it. There's so much more to answer on every question. I'm going to give you one definition the way I see it. I would split it into three things. A chassid is someone, number one, that knows the real truth. He really knows what is a real Yid meant to look like. And obviously a Rebbe helps us know that. What is a real Yid meant to look like? What is his davening meant to look like? His learning, his avas Yisrael, his midas. What is it really meant to look like? That's number one. Number two, at the same time, the chassid knows where he is right now. He doesn't fool himself, which means two things. Number one, he doesn't think he's better than he is. He knows exactly where he is. And number two, he doesn't think he's worse than he is. He knows exactly where he is. And number three is he keeps on trying to get closer to that place where he's meant to be. So, in short, a chassid is someone that knows the destination, nothing less than what Chassidus explains to us what a real Yid is meant to look like. At the same time, a chassid also knows exactly where he is right now. He doesn't convince himself he's somewhere where he's not, positive or negative. And then number three is he keeps trying to get better and better. Someone once asked the Rebbe, he says, I want to become your chassid, but I don't want to look like your chassidim. I don't like the way they look, whatever that meant. So the Rebbe said, my chassid is someone that wakes up in the morning and says, today is going to be better than yesterday. That's my chassid. If you're doing that, you're my chassid.
Thank you. Rabbi Raskin, you would like to add anything to this?
As Rabbi Lipsker mentioned, there's a lot to talk about being a chassid. There are many madregas of a chassid. First of all, the simple interpretation of chassid is one who does chesed, acts of goodness and kindness. The Alter Rebbe said that a chassid is seifon. That Gemara says, what is a chassid? One who burns his nails. And even though when you burn your nails after you cut it, it could be, God forbid, mazik, it could hurt the person. Yet a chassid is going to do avos Yisrael, to love another Jew, even if, God forbid, it's going to somewhat hurt him. In other words, you have to have Mesiras Nefesh for avos Yisrael. And then Alter Rebbe in Tanya says, what's a chassid? Which means he does for the Eibishter because the Eibishter wants it. It's not what I want. What does the Eibishter want? On a similar vein, I think it was Dr. Weiss once asked the Rebbe, what is the meaning of a chassid? Can I be a chassid? And the Rebbe said, if you care about other Jews, then you're my chassid. Similarly, the Rebbe told a famous rabbi who also had no beard, etc., you are a chassid in camouflage. Even though you didn't have the begodim, the beard, the jacket, but the fact that you go and you mekarev Yidden, you are a chassid in camouflage. The Rebbe told once Rabbi Gutnik about Rabbi Shlomo Raskin that they are chassidim without the hat and jacket, without the beards. So it's a philosophy. Number one, to go beyond the letter of the law. Not what the minimum is, but what is the maximum. Number two is to care about another Jew, person avos Yisrael. And similarly, thirdly, a chassid is was will the Eibishter? What does God want? How can I make Hashem happy? So those are a few thoughts on a chassid.
And like as you both said beforehand, there's so much more. This is only scratching the surface. Um, Rabbi Raskin, do Rebbes do any averos or make mistakes? What about the others, Moshe, Aaron? And if no, then why did Moshe Rabbeinu make a mistake by hitting the rock?
It's a phenomenal question. And the truth is, to really answer the question, you have to be a Rebbe and a Tzaddik. But from Das Tachten, let me give you the following answer. Number one is, Alter Rebbe says in Tanya that the definition of a Tzaddik is Moyez Berah. He discusses evil. So by nature, a Tzaddik cannot do an Aveda. Now, the question that you asked, how's it possible that Moshe Rabbeinu made a mistake, he hit the rock? So there are many answers to that question, but there's a Hasidic answer that Moshe Rabbeinu hit the rock in order to defend the Jewish people. In other words, as we said earlier, Chassid Seifan, a Chassid himself is willing to undergo challenges and difficulties to save another Yid. Moshe Rabbeinu wanted to spare the entire Jewish people. Why? Because what did Hashem say? If you talk to the rock and the rock will give forth water, then you will have a good mashal to show the Jewish people, look, this rock, that's Pasha Ashtain, it has no seichel, it has no midas, it doesn't get reward for doing anything, yet it listens to my words. Allah has kama yid or chassid as seichel, as midas, and you get reward for doing my mitzvahs. You have to do what the Torah says. Moshe did not want to undermine the Jewish people. He did not want to, God forbid, make the Yid lower than a rock. So he hit the rock. He said, hey, Bishta, what do you want? The rock doesn't hear either. He's also deaf. So it was an honor, the honor of the Jewish people. Number two, I heard a beautiful word once that someone asked the Frierdiker Rebbe along these lines, if a Rebbe never sinned, so what does the Rebbe do in the month of Elul, which is the month of Tshuva? He doesn't have to do Tshuva if he never sinned. I heard a beautiful word. He said that the Frierdiker Rebbe said that in the month of Elul, I make a recollection of all the brachas I gave out throughout the entire year to people. Brachas for children, brachas for parnasa, brachas for health. And I go through all these brachas in my mind, and I say which people were not yet helped. If the bracha didn't help them yet, I would work on that bracha to do tshuva, to fix that bracha, to make sure it works. So that's the madrega of tshuva by Rebbe.
Very geschmack. The last story I've never heard before. Very, very nice. Rabbi Lipsker, how did the Rebbe work all day and night, I guess, and barely sleep? He is human.
So he is human it's true, but anybody that knows anything about the Rebbe knows that the Rebbe is definitely not your average human. That's for sure. I mean, the fact that the Rebbe performs miracles, the fact that the Rebbe has Ruach HaKodesh, right, that tells you that the Rebbe is not made of the same stuff that me and you are. And these are facts that the Rebbe barely slept and barely ate. I don't think the person asking is questioning the facts. So a Rebbe is way beyond the average human being. Just to share a little story that Chassidim would say, someone once came to a Chassid of the Tzemach Tzedek, I believe, and he said, your Rebbe takes panim, or Rebbes in general take panim. And he said, even though maybe we shouldn't repeat these type of things, but just to understand, he said he's taking panim because panim come with money, dmei pan, and he gets honor. Everybody's asking him for things, and everybody's giving him all that honor. So it's all about honor and money. And the Chassid wanted to explain to this person that he really has no idea what we're dealing with. We're dealing with someone that we really have no idea. He's way beyond us, way above us. So he gave him a mashal. He said there was once a family that every Motzai Shabbos they would take their challah pot and they would clean it out, and then they would take all that mixed water and challah, all that dirty water, and they would give it to the cow. And every Sunday morning the cow would look forward to that pot of challah. One week the family forgot to share it with the cow, so they spilled it out. And the cow was thinking, that's it. The owners finally got jealous. They also wanted to taste this delicious water. So what this chassid was explaining to this person is, in a cow's mind, yeah, this is amazing water, and if the water is gone, it must be that the owners wanted to drink that water. But any human being understands that that water is, you're not even allowed to drink that water, most probably. So when we're talking about the Rebbe, we need to realize and understand that we're really talking about someone that's on a whole nother level, not 10 times as big as us, not a million times as big as us, someone that's literally on another level. I mean, just to understand, the Rebbe knows Torah, okay, we know that. I also know Torah. But there are certain things that make us realize that it's not like we're small and he's big. I don't have a little bit of Ruach HaKodesh and the Rebbe has a lot. I have no Ruach HaKodesh and the Rebbe has Ruach HaKodesh. I don't make small miracles and the Rebbe makes big. I don't make miracles at all and the Rebbe makes miracles. It puts the Rebbe on a whole different level. And it's important to remember that, who we're talking about.
Yashir Koyach. Rabbi Raskin, why were the Misnagdim so opposed to Chassidus?
So that question has many different forms, many different shapes, and in each generation there's a different angle to it. But first of all, it's important to know that Rebbe said today there are no such thing as Misnagdim. That's number one, which means we have the power to impact and influence and inspire every single Yid Chassidus. That's a very important note. Number two is the Rebbe said to people who asked the Rebbe, who was right, the Vilna Gaon or the Alter Rebbe. And the Rebbe said very clearly to people in Yeshivas and in letters that today, if the Vilna Gaon would be alive, he would agree with Chassidus. That's what he said. Why? Because his concern was that by Yidden learning Chassidus, they're going to stop doing Torah mitzvahs, and they're going to get very, very philosophical. And this will bring Yidden away from Yiddishkeit, and more than that, they'll have now Sfekis and Amunah, etc., etc. The Rebbe said like this, that today you ask the average person, even a secular person, even a goy lahavd, what is a chassid? A chassid, those are the guys with the big beards and the big payas and the big hat and the long jackets. And you ask a yid, what's a chassid? The guy, he puts on 2 pairs of tefillin and he davens all day and he does mitzvahs all day. That's a chassid. So do you think the Vilna Gaon would be against it? That's number one. Number two, I want to tell you an amazing story that Rabbi Shapiro from Florida says. He said he heard it himself from Rabbi Yisroel N, the Rosh Yeshiva of YU. Even though we Chassidim hear the story a bit different, he heard a different twist on it. He said that Rabbi Yisroel N said that he had from Kabbalah, which means from generation to generation, that the Alter Rebbe wanted to visit the Vilna Gaon, as we know. And he came, according to them, with Rabbi Yitzchak Barditchev. We have a different girsa of the story. And the story is that he went and he knocked on the door. And the Vilna Gaon went and he looked through the peephole of the door, the keyhole. And he sees the holy face of the Alter Rebbe was shining. And he says to himself, all I need to do is let him in. And in 3 hours, I'll be a chassid, I will follow him, and I will make other chassidim. Yet, he did not open the door. Why? Because the Vilna Gaon used to learn on a table together with his mother. His mother said, don't open up the door. So Misad Kibbud aim, he did not open the door. That's number one. So what a misnagid is, but did not, it's irrelevant. Today, anyone who's honest with themselves knows that a chassid is one who is Afruma Yid, who learns Torah and mitzvahs behidur. That's number one. What are they opposed to? Years ago, they were very jealous. The Rebbe himself, with Habring, I remember, and he used to say, that pertained to the Frierdiker Rebbe, when the Frierdiker Rebbe was in Poland and there were other Polish Rebbeim, they were jealous of the Frierdiker Rebbe. Just like the brothers were jealous of Yosef. The Frierdiker Rebbe's name was Yosef. So they were jealous of him. There's no question in my mind that the main reason today and in the previous generation was because the Rebbe was so much greater in learning and in dynamism and impact and holiness and kedusha and ruach hakodesh that they were jealous of the Rebbe. That's the only reason logical that makes sense to me why they had a problem. And that is why today we don't see the Rebbe Begashmias, so he's not a threat to the other communities. That's why today many, many more people are coming closer to Chassidus. That could be the Rebbe's Mesiras Nefesh, that he hid himself now from our generation for that reason. But that is the truth about the why Misnagdim were opposed to this. That's the only reason. I was talking to a Velta Shayid a few days ago. He told me, I want to tell you something, that I met the Lubavitch Rebbe, I met the Satmar Rebbe, I met other great tzaddikim, and the Rebbe was the greatest, he says. The Rebbe was the greatest. My uncle Avram Hecht, Alav Shalom, who was the rabbi of Sharet Zion, a big Sephardi community in Flatbush or on Ocean Parkway. He said, I met all the chief rabbis of Israel. I met all the great tzaddikim throughout the whole world. And there was nobody like the Rebbe. You can't compare. It's a different geder. Like Rabbi Lipsker said before, it's a different dimension. It's a different world. It's not like lower and higher, smaller and bigger. You're talking about apples and oranges. You're talking about planets and you're talking about a stone. It's two different worlds. The Rebbe is in a Neshama of Atzilus and a Guf Gashmi. And we're nothing. There's no comparison. So in all simple and American terms is, I believe, the entire level of Misnagdim came in this generation simply out of jealousy. And today, there's no reason for that anymore. And again, the Rebbe has told us there's no such thing as Misnagdim today. And it's up to us to influence and inspire others to learn Chassidus.
Yes, Koyach. I have to apologize to the talmidim. Officially, this is supposed to be a crossfire turning into a fabrengen. So it's very, very geschmack. I'm loving this, and I'm sure the talmidim as well. Rabbi Lipsker, we're going to move on to a bit of a different category. What is the meaning of the word Hiskashrus, and can you give us some examples of how a person can exercise their Hiskashrus?
Okay. So first of all, Hiskashrus means, as you mentioned right away in the beginning, it means to connect. It means a connection. Obviously, it also means taking this connection very seriously. Maybe I should mention now, again, I don't know what's going to come up and what else we're going to discuss, but it's very important to remember that Hiskashrus means, or Hiskashrus is on two levels. There's one Hiskashrus that's automatic. The Rebbe is connected to us 100% unconditionally, and we're connected to the Rebbe unconditionally also. We have this deep connection that whether you feel it or not, it's there. Then there's another connection that we try feeling. Just like sometimes you don't feel a connection to your parents, but you're connected to them. You're their child and you're connected. Sometimes you feel better about it. Sometimes you don't feel it at all. Sometimes you even feel like you want to go against your parents, but you're connected. Now, what ways to actually make that connection a part of your life? So the Rebbe made it very clear, and it's important that everybody knows. The Rebbe said the way to connect is in two ways, more or less. One is every single one of you need to learn the Rebbe's Torah. And a lot of it. Keep learning the Rebbe's Torah, and that will make you start thinking the way the Rebbe thinks. The Rebbe gave us so much Torah. The Rebbe didn't give us a little bit of Torah. The Rebbe gave us without any limits Torah. Bizbuz ha'aitzres. The Rebbe didn't stop telling us his way of looking at the world, his way of looking at a Yid, his way of looking at Torah, Hashem. And we need to learn it, and we'll get the Rebbe's way of thinking. And number two is, another way to be connected to the Rebbe, again, in a way that you feel it, is by doing things that connect you with the Rebbe. Now, I would say that it's maybe good to think about the connection when you're doing it. So when I'm learning the Rebbe's Torah, of course, it's already connecting me, but it's maybe good to think about now I'm connecting with the one that said this Torah. When you're doing something for the Rebbe, Miftzayim, or learning Chitas, if you're doing Rambam already. So not only to just do it by habit, but to remember that this is my connection with the Rebbe. There's more to say. We'll see what the Rabbi Raskin has to say.
Yeah, I'd like to add something. The Rebbe said in the Sikha, Kisei Tavshin Nun, that the meaning of the Hiskashrus is like a kesher, a knot of tefillin. The kesher of your tefillin is on your head, that a person should not be Mesiach Das. In other words, when you are wearing tefillin, the halach is you're not allowed to forget that you're wearing tefillin. And the idea of a knot in general, the Zohar says, is to remember. Years ago, when people wanted to remember something, they had to do something later that day. They would take a string and make a knot around their finger, and that would be a remembrance that they had something to do. So the idea of Hiskashrus means that you have a knot. You and the Rebbe are a knot, and because of this, you're not Mesiach Das. You don't stop thinking about the Rebbe. That is the meaning of Hiskashrus. So before you go somewhere, you do something. What would the Rebbe want me to do? Will I bring the Rebbe Nachas Ruach? How can I make the Rebbe happier? So Hiskashrus is a state of mind. It's an attitude. And that is, I am connected to the Rebbe. I want to bring the Rebbe joy and nachas. How can I do that? That's the meaning of Hiskashrus. Now, a few things. A story, my Zayda had a famous story that in Tafshin, Simchas Torah, Tafshin Nun, my grandfather was in the sukkah that afternoon before Shmi Atzeres, before the Hakofis, and he said that he said a few l'chaims, whatever, and he closed his eyes for a little bit, and he has a dream. He has a dream. He sees the Rebbe in front of him, and he has a tshuko, he has a desire, partially wanted to kiss the Rebbe. That was his dream, and he woke up. That night he went to Hakofis in 770, and my grandfather used to get a Sefer Torah for one of the Hakofis. And while my grandfather was dancing around, I was there in 770. I saw this. I'm an eyewitness. The Rebbe went like this, and he blew him a kiss for the whole 770. I was standing around some people, and they said, "Who was that?" "Oh, that was Rabbi Heoghts." I'm not sure. It was, and they weren't sure. So the Rebbe wanted to remove all doubt. And when my grandfather went by the Rebbe again, he went a second time, right in front of him, in his face. There was no shayla who it was. After Hakofis, my grandfather was talking to Rabbi Shmuel, and he told him like this. He said, "I always knew the Rebbe was Yidei Machshavos. The Rebbe knew what I was thinking. But now I know the Rebbe is Yidei Chalomes. He knows what I'm dreaming." Hiskashrus means I want to give the Rebbe a kiss. That's Hiskashrus. And the fact that it's not coveted for a chassid to give the Rebbe a kiss, okay, I can't do it, but I want to. That's Hiskashrus.
If I can just
Yes.
looking on that. So someone once came into the Rebbe and he said, "Your Chassidim have a ahava mugzemes, an exaggerated love to you. It's overdone how much they love you." So the Rebbe said, "What can I do if I have a ahava mugzemes? If I have an exaggerated love to them, it's like a ahava kamayim panim al panim. It's just they're reflecting my love to them." So yeah, ahava is definitely a central part of Hiskashrus, no question.
Shekoyach. Rabbi Raskin, how do I know that the Rebbe knows who I am? You kind of answered it already with the dream story, but the question was asked, and I'm sure it'll bring a lot more to the table. How do I know that the Rebbe knows who I am? It's a question that every child or every person could have, in times.
Look, I'm sure Rabbi Lipsker can answer this question on many levels, and any Mashpia can. I'll share a few stories, examples, but again, this is a very simple answer. First of all, the Rebbe by nature is Rosh Bnei Yisrael, the head of the Jewish people. A head feels its foot, it feels an ingrown toenail. Even if you are the most lowest person, the Rebbe feels you. So surely the Rebbe feels every person, but you want more concrete answers. So they used to tell a story when I was in yeshiva that there was a balabas from Manchester who came to the Rebbe and told the Rebbe in Yeshivas, after he left at the end of Tishrei, he used to go back into the Rebbe for Yeshivas before they left. He said to the Rebbe, they say when the Rebbe blew the Kiyah Shofar, after he blew the Shofar, he went back to his stand. He went back to the front, to his pulpit, to his chair, and he would uncover the towels for a second and give a glance over the whole 770. Again, I saw these things with my own eyes. I'm not telling you stories that happened 1,000 years ago. So he told the Rebbe that they say when the Rebbe gives that glance, when he takes his talus off his eyes for a moment to look at everybody, he sees everybody in the shul. Is that true? So the Rebbe said to him, "Tell me, your grandchild was here for Tishrei, yeah?" He says, "Yeah." He Says, how come Rosh Hashanah he was wearing glasses, and Simchas Torah he wasn't wearing glasses? So he answered the question. But there's a story that Rabbi Bucket from Chicago tells that he saw a soldier, and he was talking to him, and he said that he went to the Rebbe, and he told the Rebbe how many soldiers died that year in Israel. I'm making the story bekitzer. And the Rebbe said to him, no, it's not. It's a different number. It's not 31, it's 32. He didn't want to argue with the Rebbe. But 6 months later, when he came back to the Rebbe again, he said, by the way, the Rebbe, you are right. How'd you know? How'd you know before I knew how many soldiers perished in Israel? And the Rebbe said that every soul that comes down to this world comes through this room, and every soul that leaves this world comes through this room. Now, how do we understand that? The Rebbe keeps track of every neshama that comes in and goes out. So, we're talking about neshama vatzilus. It's a different gedder. It's a different olam b'chlal. So we're talking about a different reality. We're talking about the difference between gvul and bli gvul. I want to tell you something interestingly. Stam, to understand the Rebbe, and it's the whole maimer this year in Basel Gani about bli gvul. The Rebbe says an amazing thing. He says, if you want to understand b'chlal, this oitzer, this special treasure God is giving you, you first have to understand the pshat of bli gvul. And then he goes on to give a whole arichas of bli gvul, and he says, this world is only gvul. So this world is only gvul, and a Rebbe is bli gvul, and we think we can understand the Rebbe. Give you one kud over here. In Tanya, the Rebbe writes that the sun is 167 times larger than the moon. The Rebbe brings in an order that according to astronomy, the sun is 5 million times larger than the moon. So is the Alter Rebbe wrong? He says no. The Alter Rebbe is talking about the diameter of the sun, which means if you take a line and you measure from the top to the bottom, it's 167 times larger. But astronomy is talking about volume. So if you take the volume, which means how much space it takes up, it's 5 million times larger than the earth. Now, I was thinking about this mashal for a minute. The sun is gevul, is limited. Now, anyone in his right mind knows you can't even get close to the sun, it's going to burn you up. And this is called gevul. The Rebbe is bli gvul. So do you have a comprehension? Can you begin to understand what a Rebbe is? We have no idea. You don't even know what the sun is. Start to think about a Rebbe. So this is the point I want to make. We're dealing here with bli gvul. It's a different reality. So does the Rebbe know? Of course the Rebbe knows. And then you have the famous word that the Rebbe Rashab, before he started Temimim, went and he chose the neshama of every Talmud that would learn in Temimim. Every single Talmud in Temimim is handpicked. So the fact that you are in Temimim is a zchus. He could have sent you to other yeshivas. I don't have to mention names of other yeshivas. But you're lucky he didn't go there. On the contrary, he handpicked you because he wants you to be his chassid. He chose you because he realized that you are the most perfect fit to be one who is his chassid, which means that you're an extension of the Rebbe, to be able to teach the world the Mesek Eliezer, Shadelo Mashkin B'Teres Zabel Achirim, to be able to be the speaker and the one who amplifies chassidus to the rest of the world. So each one of us who's in Temimim has that koyach. Those were in other yeshivas and not there because they decided not to. It's because basically we didn't want them. So you have to realize this is supposed to be here.
So in essence, the Rebbe knows who we are. Rabbi Lipsker, what is the proper way to write to the Rebbe?
Okay. So I think there's another question connected to that. You don't want to put that all together, or let me start with this, and I guess you'll.
As you wish. I want to try to keep the answers to a minute or two.
Okay.
I'd like to try to cover as many questions as possible.
Okay.
So you want to cover within the answer that there's different types of ways of writing to the Rebbe. You can include that.
No, whatever. Okay, I guess we'll start. So I think there's two things. Obviously, there's how you do it technically. Like, what do you do? How do you do it? That's one question. And then there's, I don't know what the person's asking, what he means, but maybe he means with what mindset. So with what mindset do you write to the Rebbe? In other words, when you know who you're writing to, usually what will end up happening is you'll write in a certain way if you just have an idea of who you're writing to. So you're writing to someone that knows, as it was just mentioned, knows you extremely well. Now, not extremely well, knows you perfectly, knows you better than you know yourself, cares about you more than you care about yourself. You're writing to someone that, again, knows everything about you, cares about you tremendously, and can help you. Also, I think when we're writing to someone like that, someone that we're literally one with, the one that feels like he's one with us, he feels like a father to us, he cares for us infinitely, which means without any limit. When you sit down and write to someone like that, again, that knows us, that cares for us, to know and to care, there's that book, He Knows and He Cares. Some people care a lot, but they don't know a lot. Some people know a lot, but they don't care a lot. You could just try to think about different people. Some people know and care, but they can't help you, right? Let's say when I needed to make an operation on my child, so I knew that he needed to make it. I cared to give it to him, but I couldn't help him and make that he shouldn't have the operation, for example. So the Rebbe is the one that knows, the one that cares, and the one that can help. When you know you're writing to someone like that, usually you'll automatically know how to write. Just think about who you're writing to. Da lifnei mi ata omed. Know more about the one you're writing to, you'll most probably express it correctly. I would say it like that.
Yes, Kayach. Rabbi Raskin. This is an interesting question in a way related to the previous one. What do I do if I feel that my pan or letter to the Rebbe was not answered?
First, you have to understand the difference between a pan and a letter, no?
Okay, so I guess maybe that we could take the question and make it generally. What happens if the person wrote to the Rebbe and he did not receive an answer?
So first of all, the Rebbe said you should have a Mashpia. You got to talk to your Mashpia and talk to him. Sometimes the answer will come through the Mashpia. Labdafka will come directly through Igris or going to the oil or the way you think the answer is going to come through. It might come through another way. So you have to always talk it over with your Mashpia. Number two is, I heard a good word years ago from a chassid. If the Rebbe doesn't answer the first time, write again. Maybe at that time when you wrote, you weren't zeicher. You weren't in a place that you were ready for the answer. You got to do a little more tshuva and a little more davening. And you have to make sure, first of all, before you write a letter, you got to go to mikveh. And you have to put on a gartel. Even if you're not married, a book has to put on a gartel. And you give tzedakah. And it'd be a good idea to say chitas and rambam before you write the letter. So there are many achonis. But let's say you didn't do the achonis, or you did all the achonis, and you weren't answered. The first thing is, I would say, go to your mashpia and talk it over with him.
Okay. Rabbi Lipsker, why must I have a connection with the Rebbe? Why can I not ask questions and brachas from another Rebbe? And he wrote in parentheses, remember that I never saw the Rebbe. So this doesn't necessarily contradict what we explained before, how a Rebbe is a Klalis and the Rebbe is way above. The question that's asked is, why specifically must he have a connection to the Rebbe and can't go to any other Rebbe?
Okay. I guess, so I would put it like this. Again, assuming that you're going to get answers and brachas from others. I guess that's what the assumption is. I don't know what you mean when you say answers anyway. You mean advice? You could go to anybody and ask advice. But I think what's important to understand is that the Rebbe Chassid relationship is not something that you exchange. So let's say, let me give a very simple example. If I have someone, a really, really kind person, okay, and he can give me everything I want. He's wealthy, he's giving, he's kind. And I have my father that doesn't do all that for me. Will you, I'm asking you, those in 7th grade, will you exchange your father for someone else? Let someone else be the one in place of my father. No one will do that. In other words, we need to understand that the Rebbe does give brachas. The Rebbe cares about us, like I said before, so much, is davening for us, is crying with us, even about, as Rabbi Raskin mentioned, our ingrown toenail. The Rebbe cries for us about anything that bothers us, our friends, our family. The Rebbe is davening for us, doing everything he can to help us. Is it possible? I don't know if it's possible to get the brachas from someone else, but let's even say it is. We don't want to change. We don't want to disconnect from our father, from our Rebbe, even if you could get something from someone else. But again, I think the Rebbe is very well connected. Until today, thousands and thousands of people, maybe you yet did not see it or feel it, how the Rebbe did give you the bracha, helped you out, or helped, again, so many thousands of people are benched daily with miracles, mamish. So the Rebbe is still answering us, still giving us, but again, to remember that we don't exchange a Rebbe for someone else, even if we'll gain out of it.
Thank you very much. Rabbi Raskin, how do you stay mekusher when you are surrounded by non-Chabad people?
I think it's the easiest way to be mekusher that way. When you talk and see the difference between us and them, you get excited knowing what you have. So the shaila is how to stay mekusher amongst Chassidim.
Okay. Rabbi Lipsker, I have a feeling you may have this question in your yeshiva, and okay, Ashkacha Pratis, we're sending it to you. Is watching sports bad for your Hiskashrus, and if yes, why?
Okay.
Moving on to a different category, more Ashkacha type of questions now.
Right, I'll try answering this short. I think the one that's asking the question doesn't mean watching a sport. Obviously, we're talking about watching sports and not watching some bachrim play in the gym. That's obvious. What I'm saying is we're not just talking about someone that watched a game. We're talking about someone that is watching games and is very into the game. That's what I think the question is, I assume. It's not just about watching one game. It's about being attached to sports. Will that disconnect you? Well, yeah, if you're connected very strongly to something else, well, yeah, then you're connecting to something else, and that's not the Rebbe. Is it bad? It depends which sports, and it depends what's going on, what else is going on the screen. But being attached to anything is it's like you're married to something, and if that's what you're fully involved in, obviously that's not Hiskashrus. But again, I just want to remind something that I said before. That does not mean that you're cutting your connection. You're not cutting your connection. Your connection is there. You are always connected to the Rebbe. Can your life be full of connections to other things? They can be, and you will never ruin the essential connection like father and son. But it's once again, you can talk about a family or a son and a father. Are you into your family? Do you like connecting with them or not? Or you like connecting with others? You can connect with others and not connect with your family, but again, you're always still connected to your family. So I hope that short answer is enough. Also, again, I think that another point is that we need to take our connection seriously. Let's say the answer would be yes. That needs to matter to you. You need to take your connections seriously, even if they cost you. Even if they cost you. It's important to remember that those that you're connected with and those that are connected with you without any limits, you don't just throw in the garbage because I have something else that I'm interested in.
Thank you. Rabbi Raskin, why do we wear a hat and jacket? And if it's so important, why don't we start wearing it before we start putting on tefillin?
The truth of the matter is, this is something more that the Mashpia and the Yeshiva has to deal with than Balabatim. But in simple terms, I will take a stab at it. If you're a soldier in an army, it's not only that you have a gun that you shoot. When people come to the army and they come to the base, they want to know who are the soldiers and who are the schleppers, who are the soldiers and who's cleaning the base. If you walk around with a hat and jacket, you know you're the chassid of the Rebbe. If not, maybe you're the janitor. So it's really, the garb represents your inner reality. It reveals who you are. But I would not say chas v'shalom, if a person is not wearing a hat and jacket, it means not a chassid. You could be a chassid. But there's a complete chassid and not a complete chassid. So at least, look, I want to tell you something. Other chassidim, not Lubavitch, when they learn in yeshiva, they learn with a hat and jacket. But Chabad, we don't. We don't learn with a hat and jacket. The Rebbe was clearly against it. He did not think we had to learn with a hat and jacket. The Rebbe himself didn't have a hat when he learned. That is not Chabad. The idea of a hat and jacket is that this is what a chassid does at these times. When you daven, you wear a hat and jacket. you walk in the street, you wear a hat and a jacket. Why? You are representing the Rebbe. So it's not about 24/7 wearing a hat and jacket. It's not about all times. A chassid wears a jacket at certain times. And if you want to be a complete chassid and you want to emulate the Rebbe, that's what you do. If you're not going to wear a hat and jacket, you're still a chassid. Yeah. But that's not the complete chassid. The complete chassid means hat and jacket. And until you're by mitzvah, you're not mechuyev to wear it. After you're by mitzvah, you're mechuyev to wear it. It's a different reality. You wear a talis and you get married. You put a hat and jacket when you get by mitzvah. Different stages in life. You accept different minhagim, different customs.
Shkoyach. We're coming close to the end of the program, just because of time. I'm going to send one more question to Rabbi Lipsker, and then I'm going to present a question to both of you, and each will have a chance to answer the question. Rabbi Lipsker, why does the Rebbe have, I guess, Chassidim, 3 pinches in their hat?
I've heard answers, but I don't know if they're true, so I'd rather not answer that.
Rabbi Raskin, you want to tackle it? I remember if I bring you once in 770, my grandfather, Rabbi Yisroel was talking, Chassidim want to wear the hat, the Rebbe is wearing the same hat, the same shoe, the same kvetch, the same drei. But when it comes to learning, a whole day like the Rebbe learns, and like davening the Rebbe learns, that they're not interested in. They're only interested about Chutzeni is the hat. But we always said that the three pinches in the hat was Chabad. The idea of Chabad, Chagas, Mihim, the idea of Chassidus. That's the oral tradition.
Thank you. So in closing, the question that I present to both of you is, can you share your go-to moment or story of the Rebbe that motivates or inspires you, especially when things are tough? We'll start with Rabbi Raskin.
Baruch Hashem, I can say that I had a lot of experiences since Gimel Tammuz when I needed the Rebbe's inspiration and guidance, and Baruch Hashem, it came through. But I'll share one experience that I had, this chus that I had, and that was the day of my wedding, which is Yud Aleph Shvat. That's my wedding anniversary, which is tomorrow, the day that Rebbe became Nasi. Many people don't know this, but after the Rebbe stopped having private Yechidusim, and he began to have general Yechidusim, there were still certain things that Rebbe did like before, in the early days. And that was when a Chassin was getting married, that day, you used the Rebbe Siddur, the Rebbe gave you his Siddur to daven from his Siddur. In the earlier years, he gave you the gartel also. But there were some very smart guys to pull off the strings from the gartel. So the Rebbe had no more gartel to give. But in the later years, he gave you his Siddur. Now, he could have given you the Siddur through Rabbi Groner, Alav Shalom, through a secretary. But you had this chus to stand right in front of the Rebbe's office, and the Rebbe handed you his Siddur, and he said, Bet ois als guts, which means pray whatever you need, and it should be answered. It was very interesting that Rabbi Groner told me the day of my wedding, he said, stand right outside the Rebbe's room. Don't grab the Siddur. Don't reach for the Siddur. You stand straight. The Rebbe will give it to you. So I'm standing straight, and the Rebbe comes out, and he takes the Siddur, and he rams it into my stomach, like a boom. And my whole body was shaking. It's like, and again, from Das Tachten, as a human being, I'm thinking to myself, the Rebbe Kanahara is not a young man. He wasn't 40 or 50 years old. He's already Kanahara, a man of 90 years old. And he takes the Siddur and he rams it into me. And my whole body is shaking. He could have given it to me, like softly. I thought he'll give it to me softly. I put my hands out gently. And the Rebbe gave me a boom. And I'm thinking to myself, why did the Rebbe do this? Because the Rebbe is telling me, I am giving you chayus. I'm giving you a charge. I'm giving you power. And therefore, whatever you do, I'm with you together. And that's what we have to know, that the Rebbe every single day is giving us his Siddur. He's giving us his atzmos. He's giving him his essence. The Rebbe is with every chassid. And all you have to do is open up your eyes. All you have to do is contemplate it for a few moments. Look at a picture of the Rebbe. Take out a mimer. and talk to the Rebbe. I tell people, talk to the Rebbe. Go to the picture and say, Rebbe, I had a bad day, I had a good day. Rebbe, I need help. Talk to him like your father. And open up your heart. If you want to cry, cry. You want to laugh, laugh. Talk to him. Every day have a conversation with the Rebbe. The Rebbe is your tate, the Rebbe is your mama. The Rebbe loves you. The Rebbe cares about you. And you have to know that. And being that we're human, we have to express ourselves verbally. So this is my inspiration. The Rebbe gave me the siddur, boom, on my entire body. Till today, I feel that inspiration.
Yasher Koyach, Rabbi Lipsker.
So I'll tell you, there's stories and ideas that the Rebbe says that to me are extremely powerful. But I think instead I'll share a personal story like Rabbi Raskin just mentioned. I think personal always talks the most. And it also connected a little bit to Rabbi Raskin said. So this is after Gimel Tammuz. I was a bacher of 14, which is not much older than the boys that are watching this. And at night, I would lay down in my bed and I would think, my mind would go in all directions, think about all types of things and very disturbing things also sometimes. And I never looked at it like a thing. You know, no stories are stories while they're happening. So whatever it was, what it was, I did not have a Mashpia at the time. So I didn't speak to a Mashpia at the time. And the real truth is, it didn't bother me by day. By day, I was a very happy, excited. I enjoyed my life. But at night, when I would lay down and my mind would float, it would float in all directions. I would sometimes be up for hours. And I never even thought about it during the day. One night before I was going to sleep, so I remembered, hey, I'm going to sleep now, and I might be up for hours thinking about all these disturbing thoughts. So I walked over to a picture of the Rebbe, like Rabbi Raskin mentioned. I didn't write to the Rebbe. I didn't go anywhere. I just stood in front of the Rebbe, and I said to the Rebbe, please, Rebbe, help me. Help me. I don't. These thoughts are very disturbing. And I also thought, because, you know, when you speak to the Rebbe genuinely, you actually get inspired. When you have a real, genuine conversation with the Rebbe, that itself inspires you. Or genuine means real. So I also at that moment felt, Rebbe, tell me a way that I can help bring Mashiach. And I went over to the Igris Kodesh, and as Rabbi Raskin mentioned, there are many ways that Rebbe answers. Sometimes Igris Oyel, sometimes through another person completely. But this is a very Baal Shem schemaisa what happened to me. I went up to Igris Kodesh. I could say all the page numbers and everything, so you can check this. It was Chelek Yitches, Chelek Chai Shin Pei Aleph. And I opened it up. I didn't really understand what it was talking about. It just said something about mikvah, tahara, and Mashpia. Okay, so I decided I'm going to take a achlata that even though I was not going to the mikvah on Shabbos, I'm going to start going on Shabbos to the mikvah. Okay. I went to my room and I wanted to write down the page numbers. That way when my father comes home, I can ask him to read it to me. Maybe there's some other hints over there, some other answer for me. So I went to my room, my bedroom, and on my bed, I pick up a piece of paper, a little scrap of orange paper, and I write down on it, Chelak Chai Shin Pei Aleph. Then I notice on the other side of the paper, it says in my mother's handwriting, Chelak Chaf Aleph Kuf Ayin Aleph. That's what it's on the paper. So without a question in my mind, I go back to the set of Igris Kodesh, I take out that Chelak, I open it up, you can check it out. And the Rebbe talks all to someone in Yiddish, so I was able to understand it, all about this that you write, that you can't sleep at night, and this you should do. To me, at that moment, I remember, I said again and again, oh my gosh. Oh, I kept on saying that again and again, because it was one of those moments when I felt the Rebbe is really here, the Rebbe really cares about my little problem, and the Rebbe really answers. And the end of the story was I went over to my mother. I asked her, what's this piece of paper? My mother had no idea. Again, no one in the world knew because it didn't express itself during the day. It was something that happened at night, and that's it. I didn't even know about it during the day. I didn't think about it. So no one in the world knew. So I asked her what that letter was. So she looks over there. She sees that there's a letter there that she wrote for herself a year earlier that she wanted to remember. She lost this piece of paper. How it ended up on my bed that day, that moment, is only Hashem knows. And the last part was that there are 3 letters on that page you can check. One was the one that I opened to. One was the one that my mother had written a year earlier that she wanted to remember. And the third one is a small letter written to Yisroel N, which is my name, to my great-grandfather. So I see my name and I see this answer from this letter that just lands on my bed. I mean, this was an amazing story for me personally. And again, it made me realize, I guess it's true always, but sometimes you like realize it when something happens to you or when you hear a personal story. I hope you took something out of this.
Both are very geschmack stories. Yud Shvat, Yud Al Shvat, the whole Maimer Basteligani, and the Rebbe ending off V'niske Zenzich, the ultimate shlichus that the Rebbe gave us to bring Mashiach. How can we end this beautiful Farbrengen with our light mission goal, which is to bring Mashiach? How can we end this off? Rabbi Raskin.
I tell the story that one of my congregants many years ago, I asked him to babysit for my oldest son, Yankel, at that time, who was a year old, when my wife was about to give birth to our second son. And the hospital was down the block, Long Island College Hospital. And Thursday night, I went to his house, or rather Thursday night, I called him up. I said, please come over. Yankel's sleeping. If you don't mind babysitting for an hour or two, I'll bring my wife to the hospital, and hopefully I'll come home after that. And you can go to sleep in my house. The baby's not going to wake up. The kids are, I went Thursday night to the hospital. And an hour later, we came back home. My wife said she's not ready to give birth. Okay. Friday night, after dinner, after the Chevra came to the house for the Shabbos and they left, then all of a sudden, my wife says, now I'm ready to go to the hospital. So I couldn't call this fellow. I had to go to his house. I run to his house. It was in the middle of Shvat, by the way. And he lived on the second story of a brownstone. His name was Mitch. And I put my hands together. I said, Mitch, get up. And he's sleeping. His wife opens up the window, says, Rabbi, what do you want? I said, Mitch, it's the real thing. And he says, what? Mashiach is here. In the middle of the night, I wake him up. I say, it's the real thing. He says, what? Mashiach is here. This is a Yid who wasn't raised Lubavitch, wasn't raised Frum, but he knew one thing. The real thing is Mashiach. The night before, he was in my house with the baby. He knew my wife was going to give birth any moment now. I wake him up in the middle of the night. I say, Mitch, it's the real thing. The him was Pashtus. The real thing is Mashiach. And this is the test. In the middle of the night, if your Mashpia wakes you up 2 o'clock in the morning, it's the real thing. What? What's the real thing? Mashiach is here. And then you know, Mashiach. If in the middle of the night, someone wakes you up, it's the real thing. And you say, what? A baseball game. Then you know, Mashiach.
Thank you, Rabbi Lipsker. Thank you, Rabbi Raskin, especially the beautiful story. Talmidim, I hope you enjoyed this Farbrengen, and certainly the schus of everything that we've learned from here. Certainly, we'll take it. We'll make it part of our lives, and just like we said before, just the achlata, just the mindset that we are going to grow through this. Just the achlata alone should be what tips the scale to bring about the coming of Mashiach. Rabbi Raskin, thank you so much. Rabbi Lipsker, thank you so much. And we should join together tonight, Farbrengen, in the Beis Hamikdash, together the Rebbe leading us all. Where we hear Teira Chadasha, Mipiv Shemelech HaMashiach. Thank you.
Rabbi Cole, thank you for organizing all these things.
Thank you very much.
Whatever you need,
Ikir Mashiach, Pirushu.
Now.
Amen. Ikir Mashiach, and everything else is details. And Yasher Koyach. Thank you very, very much, everybody.